say I'm tagging in another agent and I've been having a conversation for 10 pages of chat before that, and I'm tagging in a new agent, technically that new agent that I tag can read above the context window from before. So even if that agent was never a part of what I was talking about, it can read what was in the conversation before. But that being said, it's limited based on the context window, in the same way that if you have a 30-page conversation versus the 10-page conversation, sometimes even with a single agent, the chat will forget what you were talking about at the beginning. And so that's a lag that we're still trying to measure. And we're actually going to be running an experiment on that this week between different types of base forms of GPT. So that would be for builder in the agent builder, for with plugins, and a random agent that was just created by somebody else. Because we want to see more about that. But for now, our workaround is simply to use combined methods of different prompt techniques that we've shown you before. So we've talked previously about the concept of doing the highlighted text to the floating exclamation point, or the exclamation point, little quotes that come up. And so if I am in here and I click on highlighted text, I can click this to go to reply. And pretty much combining those two techniques together of both replying at and tagging what you're replying about, as well as a new agent to call in, would mean that if I had this part of my conversation 10, 20, 15, however many pages away from the agent that I'm now tagging in at the bottom, I could theoretically integrate this data out beyond the context window limitations that are naturally occurring, so that new agent has full context of what we're talking about. And even though this isn't required for me to do this for things that are shorter, if I'm only talking in like 5 pages of chat, for example, I'm still generally trying to do this because I think in the long run, as we get more complicated with multiple agents, this is going to be really important to making sure that you're keeping the conversation on track. Because when you have more than one of them going on, it's a lot harder to manage the continuity of the goal sometimes. Because if you talk to one agent and say, I want you to get me a car, and then you tell agent B, I want it to be red, maybe that's a bad metaphor, but it's like you end up where the second agent B only knows that you want something that's red, and agent A only knows that you want a car. So you need to make sure that those things are combined together, and that there's no situations where you're isolating data away from other agents. And then the second thing that happened as it relates to the betas is that I've only seen one instance of this so far, and I only had a quick peek at it, but I was able to get a screenshot, a little snippet of code here. So I was working in a base GPT-4 model, and I noticed that I had been working through, for the purpose of this presentation, a very long decision tree diagramming process. And I had gotten into a pattern where I was going through the same general steps, where I'm heading back to the same GPT with plugins chat that I need to do the training, because the diagram plugins are a little more efficient than the agents sometimes. So I've been doing that. I go into a random other conversation, and we were working on a lecture for USD that we gave yesterday. Sorry, University of San Diego. And so pretty much I was simply pivoting and asking a new question, totally different chat, no context related to any of the previous work I've been doing on decision trees. And I'm talking to Browser Pro, which is just a normal agent, not made by GPT, somebody else's agent, but just a standard agent. And as I'm working through it, this thing pops up that tells me it's working through Action Cider. And it looks like it's, this is an agent pulling a reference from because Mermaid Chart, this is all part of a plugin that I would normally use. That's why I would go to GPT-4 plugins to get to this. So it's very interesting, because we think that this means the plugins will, the way, like, between the agent tagging situation and what we're seeing with the plugins, we think all these things will be combined into just let's use interface in some shape or fashion. But this is the only instance I've seen of this happening so far, and our next steps are to focus on the agent API a little bit more, because it's separate from the regular API for OpenAI, to understand where they're going with this. Because I think, again, like, these huge changes in the functionality are really going to have long-term effects on how we want to do strategy.